Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DM's Guild review, my written and video review series where I take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. This video will be reviewing the DM supplement Prophecies as Narrative Tools designed by Martín Davico for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. A review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you enjoy my videos, consider using my affiliate links if you're online shopping and supporting me via patreon.com/roguewatson. Shoutouts to Platinum patrons Joe, Will, Tiny Dancer, Manuel, Basil, Wizard, Princess, Christopher, Dave, Star, Loverly, and Gaston, and Gold patrons RPG, Papercrafts, Charming Grenade, Pretty Boy, and Yuma, Marcos, Stead, Vicente, Gilberto, Adam, Dead Lizard, Lounge, Sam, Ross, Lumpy Spuds, Jerome, Fatboy619, Sclenny, Nick, and Farty McButterpants. Thank you all very much for your support. This is kind of a challenging product to review as it is not an adventure despite the absolutely jaw-droppingly gorgeous cover of original artwork here by, excuse me while I scroll through, Keo Smash, and it even says on the bottom, this is not an adventure, I promise, which is too bad because it's really fantastic artwork. I'd love to see this accompanied with an adventure. What this is a supplement for DMs on how to incorporate one of the most classic storytelling devices into your campaign, which is the prophecy. And the prophecy can take many different forms. It can be very cryptic. It can be pretty obvious. Who delivers the prophecy matters. If the prophecy is inevitable or if it is something that should be prevented, or if it's a motivation for the players. There's all kinds of ways of dealing with and manipulating prophecies. And this supplement just does a really good job over about a dozen pages of breaking down everything I just talked about, basically, like what prophecies are, how they're used in stories, and how they can be used specifically in D&D. And honestly, it's written almost academically, but not using, stuffy language. It's still very easy to read. In fact, it's incredibly well written. The introduction alone is very, very nice. But then you're thinking, okay, well, how does this actually apply to like D&D? Like, okay, I've understood the prophecy. I know, the point behind it. Maybe I could use it, but how, where's the function there? And thankfully, it explains how to use prophecies and actually break them down into different tables and things. First of all, it breaks prophecies into 3 different categories of prophecies. There's the here be the future, which is basically unavoidable fate. It's saying something that will happen. We can't stop it. It's something that, if anything, we should prepare for. Usually it's the coming of some big change. Often this can be like maybe evil is coming, but that's actually a separate prophecy I'll get to in a second. But it's usually just some big event is going to happen based on something else happening. And the nice thing is, in a further, not really chapters, but a further section, it breaks down like, how do we identify our prophecy? It literally feels like you're going to school because it's like, subject, object, noun, verb, that kind of thing. But does so in a way that doesn't feel like school. It feels like very fun because, well, we're talking about D&D. The second one is A Hero Rises. This is probably the most famous prophecies type because this is the chosen one story. If you have played basically any video game RPG, especially JRPGs, they love this trope, which is the chosen one storyline. And in fact, it uses some examples like from the Matrix. Neo is the chosen one. There's a little bit of a prophecy there, I believe, like Trinity talks about, she was destined to fall in love with which that one might be an unavoidable fate one, but the actual chosen one is part of A Hero Rises, which is, and usually, it's a reluctant hero. You have to kind of step up to the prophecy and become that hero. Technically Anakin from the prequels is a chosen one story, but that's an interesting flip. I won't go into Star Wars too much, but that, brings balance to the Force. That could be an example of how people misinterpret a prophecy, saying that, oh, he's going to bring good to the world. Well, in fact, at the time, the world was full of Jedi, and then Anakin comes along, and then a whole bunch of Jedi die, and technically it brought balance to the Force, just not the kind of balance that people were thinking. So that's a fun way of misinterpreting a prophecy. And then Evil Approaches, which is this one is different from Here Be the Future because this is something that should be prevented. This is usually a evil plot from a lot of, and you probably use this one, I don't even think about it, with a lot of like evil cults and stuff. They have an Evil Approaches plot line essentially, but it's something that can be thwarted. It's not inevitable. It's not an unavoidable fate. It's something that the heroes should work towards thwarting. So that's a good breakdown of how these different prophecies work, and then it goes on to give examples of each of the different prophecies and then breaking them down. We can also create our own prophecies, and this is the best part of the book for sure, is giving me tables. This is a D&D book, so we get tables of different ways to manipulate a prophecy, and it correctly identifies, okay, here is the, do we have a prophet? Do we not have a prophet? Who are the actors involved? In other words, the characters that the prophecy speaks to. What is the condition that triggers the prophecy happening? And then what are the results of that trigger that then happens? And it breaks down all these different kind of examples that you can use. And, you can use these examples, or you can just use them as motivation. And the designer correctly says, like, look, I can't, forging a prophecy in your campaign is going to be very difficult for me as this designer to do. So the best thing for me to do is to provide you with the tools on how to take some sample prophecies and rework them to make them very fun, enjoyable, suitably cryptic and all of that in this section where it says poetic phrasing. So in this case, it replaces the phrase, the prophecy, when someone of low birth becomes a monarch, a few nobles will break their vow to the crown and start a war with the kingdom. That doesn't sound like a prophecy, although it is technically. And the designer breaks down each of these 3 steps. You've got the identifying element of the condition that what happens, what's going to happen, and then we can break down all of those and replace each of those parts with different flowery language. For example, for when that which is red turns blue, those bound by word, by fealty sworn, shall kneel no more. And then it says, for one example, you can say, by metal and blood will future be forged, which is pretty obviously pointing to some kind of conflict. Whereas in this case, the designer said, we could go even further and say, the tower shall stand, 10 swords will be drawn, and 2 cups on the table shall rest upside down, which is all references to tarot cards, which is not something I would be familiar with if the designer didn't tell me. And it says to make that make more sense, you could have a fortune teller be the one to actually tell the players the prophecy during this, that's where they learn the prophecy from. And it does a really good job in this section, the following one, Introducing a Prophecy, of explaining how to incorporate the prophecy. Don't make it incidental, make it a primary reason. Like, you go to the dungeon and during the very rewarding climax, you learn the prophecy. It's a very important part of the narrative. You can make them puzzling it out, part of their overarching campaign, or you can have it be just a little bit of that dungeon, but it should be a main thing that the party does not dismiss. So prophecies should always be very, very important to the narrative and help shape and supplement whatever you're working on. And then finally, we get examples of those 3 prophecy types I mentioned, which was the hero, the future, what was it called? Here be the future. And then the hero rises and evil approaches. So in this case, it gives an example of, for example, let's see, which one should we use an example of? Let's actually do the first one. I like that one. The Unavoidable Fate is the eerie song. So in this case, the prophet is a mermaid, and she explains that there is a evil that is going to happen if the villain does something. Oh, sorry, this is the evil approaches one. That's right. Obviously, what I'm just explaining. And explains how an evil is going to happen if that villain does something. So the actual prophecy reads, you should head to a specific location, because if you don't, the world will be destroyed when the antagonist reclaims something. That's a really fun way of breaking it down. Very, very brass tacks, like very obvious, like here's the phrases that we want to use, which is a fun way of thinking how to make a prophecy. In other words, don't start with the big flowery language. Start with exactly what you're trying to explain, and then you can take apart that actual each sentence fragment and replace it with something more interesting. And in this case, the designer actually frames it around the cutscene itself. So it says, people downtown say that at the death of night, when not a single thing can be heard other than the howling winds passing through the old houses near the river, a mermaid sings an eerie song, a warning to whoever will listen, and it goes something like this. As the storm fast approaches, you should look to the north, for that which should die refuses to go, and the oceans shall rise, and the empires will fall, should the ruler of old sit again on its throne. That's even not that like flowery compared to the other one, but it still feels more prophetic, and you're still giving the same amount of information. And what's nice here is the designer includes how to replace each of those little bits, like what mythical creature supplies the prophecy, what is the location we're talking about, how exactly does the end of the world happen, who is the antagonist, and then what is the condition the antagonist needs to get. So you can see automatically how you can just take a basic prophecy, which again, I love that it's defined as 3 different main kinds of prophecies, and then break it down into those different portions and then replace those portions as you see fit. It's a really, really smart way of teaching and teaching players how to implement their own prophecies rather than just trying to give a whole, rather than just trying to explain, here's what prophecies are and good luck. And also, rather than just saying, here's a bunch of sample prophecies you can use in your campaign, instead it says, here are a few samples, but I'm going to teach you how to customize these samples so that you can basically take your own prophecy and then rework some little bits and bobs to make it work in your own campaign. It's a really, really awesome way of using this narrative tool. I'm very impressed. The other thing I'm very impressed with is the presentation and layout. It is awesome. I haven't talked about that at all yet, but I've been flipping through the pages. As you can see here, we get amazing, incredible original artwork by that artist, and it is freaking awesome. It's just amazing. I love the look of this entire product. This is better than many adventures that I have reviewed. Many adventures I've reviewed. This is like where the bar is. When I review other products and I have to complain about how it just doesn't look good, like this is the kind of bar I'm talking about with unfortunately making a lot of those other ones not look great because this looks so damn good and attractive. I love the little flowery like letter bits right here and just the way the art like meshes with the text, and it even goes beyond that. But look at the way the bullet points are done. The words like pop out of here. It's just, and the tables all look just sexy as hell. Like I cannot throw enough praise upon how good this supplement looks for something, and I don't want to discredit the idea behind it, but it's just, it sounds bad, but it is just a DM supplement on a very specific subject. In other words, this didn't necessarily need to have an amazing layout and this incredible artwork to where a lot of adventures or like, class supplements would probably benefit a lot from that stuff. And this one does. Obviously, it is way elevated and becomes honestly probably one of the best products I've reviewed this year because of just how damn good that artwork and the presentation meshes with how effective the material is. So it's a funny thing to look at something that's such a very specific niche topic, which is prophecies, but prophecies are such a big part of adventuring, and especially in fantasy adventure. We love to use particularly the Chosen One and Evil Approaches as, and probably both together. Frankly, you could have, a Chosen One appears because there's evil approaching. It's all about the prophecies, and this really does a great job of breaking it down, how to implement those prophecies into our campaigns. And this is going to be a little bit of a shorter review because that's pretty much all it does. But what it does is really, really damn good. I'm very impressed. Let's go over my pros and cons for prophecies as narrative tools. Pro, detailed example prophecies and how to customize and present them, which is all of these tables here, which is very, very nice to have. Pro, multiple tables for crafting and customizing your own prophecies. Sorry, the first one was all these examples, which are the one-page prophecies. So how to change and customize those, that's an awesome section. And then how to introduce your own prophecies, and it gives you an additional tables and motivations and reasons behind all of those. Absolutely phenomenal. And Pro, gorgeous layout with incredible original artwork. Holy tap dancing crap. This is just one of the best looking products I've ever looked at, and it's a damn 12-page DM supplement. Like, wow. Cons, I got nothing. This is an amazing product for what it wants to do. The only thing I would mention, this is not a con, but this is one very, very minor quibble nitpick, is that it could use a better title, I think. Prophecies as narrative tools sounds like a chapter, or at best a subheading. I think it would have been a lot better to have a classic like title : subheading. In this case, I don't know, Destiny is Foretold, : prophecies as narrative tools. That's very nitpicky. If I was editing it, that's probably the only editor note I would have is like, have you thought about just a little bit of a more catchy title rather than something that sounds like a very like academic, stuffy section of a academic book, whereas this is not that. It's very approachable, it's very readable, and I cannot recommend this enough. Verdict: prophecies as narrative tools brilliantly and intuitively introduces, identifies, and deconstructs multiple kinds of prophecies to include in your D&D campaign. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson, and you can follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel. Thank you.